Moving on to the next session, the poison of Bengal, the 1930s murder that shocked the world. Over to the stock.
Test, test. All
Hello,
right.
yeah. Good evening and welcome to the Kerala Literature Festival. Thank you. And good to see you all this evening. Dan Morrison is an American writer and journalist, and he has come from Washington. His book, The Poisoners of Bengal, is a true crime story set in Bengal in the 1930s. It's a sensational story that at that time actually made global headlines. And in fact, the New York Times even front-paged it. This is in a small place in Bengal where this murder happens. You cannot call it a murder mystery because he reveals who the murderer is right at the beginning. That's only a small part of the story. The story is really incredible. It's fascinating, and one of the interesting things is that the murderer borrows his murder weapon from Sherlock Holmes. Huh? What? I mean, this is a true story, and you have Sherlock Holmes. He does not exist. It's a work of fiction. But that's one of the many layers that you will find in this book. It's an interesting story set in very interesting times. Dan, thank you so much for coming to us at the Kerala Literature Festival here in Calicut. How are you coping with the heat?
I'm loving it.
You're loving it.
It's terrific.
Well, that's because you can go back day after tomorrow, whereas we have to stay on. But thank you so much for being here with us and talking to us about the book. Now, what can you tell us about your book?
So, The Poisoner of Bengal is a demented true story about one of the oldest crimes there is, and that's fratricide. There's a conflict between Zamindar, the Raja of Pakur, and his younger half-brother, who's entitled to half a share of their, rather enormous properties. And in a sort of very modern fashion, the Raja decides to do away with his brother, not simply for the wealth and
One
the...
second, just talk louder.
Oh,
They're not able to
not
hear
simply
you.
for the
Yeah.
wealth and the prestige that he will accrue from this, but also for a very modern reason, and that is that he wants to reinvent himself as a movie producer and become, a film mogul in the early days of Indian cinema. It's one of the elements that makes this a 20th century crime, like maybe a truly modern murder in a very traditional setting.
So, I grew up in Calcutta, and I never heard about this story. And modern India has completely forgotten this story. So how did you find this story? This is something that we don't know. And here is this American working somewhere who finds this story and relays it to the world. How did you chance upon this story?
It was a happy accident about a very unfortunate tale. I was doing research on cholera and plague and medical history in India when I came across a small newspaper cutting from the 1930s that described this murder in just maybe an inch and a half in a foreign newspaper. And this diverted me entirely from what I had been looking into to scrape the archives and the files of libraries and other settings on 3 continents to find the many different puzzle pieces that would give a broader view of this crime and of the world in which it took place.
There is, like all good stories, there is a hero and there is a villain. It's about the protagonist and the antagonist, as they would have in Greek tragedy, but it's also like what we talk about, the goody-goody versus the baddie-baddie. But it is also not all that stereotypical, because the hero is the villain is a very complex character. He's a very cultured person. He's horrible as a human being. He's mean, he's manipulative, he's cruel, but he's also cultured. So how do you kind of, you talked a little bit about the film and, literature, influence of literature and cinema on him. How do you see this character?
He's just a terrific villain. He's a true, he's an innovator in terms of crime and an iconoclast who has turned against the mores and the habits of his family and of his clan and of his class to try to become someone new, and he won't let anyone stand in the way, not least his younger brother.
Would you say that modern psychologists would classify him as a psychopath?
It's not my field, but he's very cinematically bad. he's very cinematically determined and unstoppable until he is stopped.
Yeah, but you see many facets of his personality. So he is horrible as a human being, all the worst aspects that you could, think of. But at the same time, you get the feeling that he is, in a way trying to show his contacts and his cleverness. You can easily murder your stepbrother very easily. Poison, rat poison, something simple. No, but he goes to extreme lengths to poison him this particular way. So what is the psychology of a man like that? That he could do something easily and get away with it, but no, he goes through extraordinary lengths, great difficulties.
Both the villain and both the killer and the victim are the sons of a very old, very wealthy landed family, and they've been bred for generations, many generations, for hundreds of years, in the habits of the rural gentry, right? And that is collecting rent, squeezing money out of peasants, performing their duties as Brahmins, and such like. And this one man, Benayendra Pandey, the Raja of Pakar, he becomes an active verb when everyone around him is a passive verb, essentially. He has the will to action, and he takes action. And although it's in the service of murder and lies, it's very affecting. It's sort of appealing. In their milieu, there's only one other person who rises to the moment, and that is this a rather small, diminutive lawyer who is almost the exact opposite of the villain. The villain is tall and good-looking and broad-shouldered, and he's described as having these doe eyes and this calm confidence. And he's undone by his physical and moral opposite, who's this tiny lawyer who just takes it upon himself to avenge this death. But they two alone in their milieu are the only two capable of taking this strong action, and it makes the drama of it very appealing to me.
The villain, he's so nasty to his wife, he's nasty to his son, he is obsessed with himself, he is so morally corrupt that he shares his mistress with the cops, with the corrupt cops, so that the policemen, so that they will look the other way when his tenants go and complain. There is no redeeming quality in terms of morality in this man. And yet, he's hypnotizing because he is so evil.
No, he's a remarkably corrupt and corrupting character. When he's arrested, in his belongings they find the name and the address of someone in the Police Intelligence Bureau. The Intelligence Bureau has no role in investigating his crime, but the appearance is that he has essentially turned someone in the Calcutta police to give him inside information on the investigation. He's unstoppable, as I would say, until the moment he's stopped.
And he's also an opium addict who has syphilis. You think of all the worst things you can have as a human being, and the man has it. Could it be that his brain was a little kind of messed up because of opium and addiction and syphilis?
The question, and I started my career as a crime reporter in New York. The question that often comes to mind is, what were you thinking? You know, when someone performs a terrible deed and is caught. In the book, I surmise that maybe his syphilis addiction had some role in his overconfidence or his madness. But those who knew him they describe all of them, including his most determined enemies. They describe a man of almost unnatural confidence and calm. When he spends, a very long hot summer in Alipur jail, he becomes friendly with a jailer, and the jailer describes him as the most noble man he'd ever met, but also one of the few true criminals to ever pass through the Alipur jail, of just pure criminality and pure nobility at the same time.
You paint the background of this episode beautifully in terms of the Bengal society, the way it is so feudal, the rich and debauched zamindars, the Indian freedom struggle gaining momentum. I wonder, how did Bengal society react to this murder? And, for instance, was there a Hindu-Muslim divide? He's a Hindu-Brahmin zamindar. So was there a kind of a Hindu-Muslim divide in the sense that people were polarized in their favoritism of the person? Was there a feeling that he's a Brahmin, so he cannot have committed this crime? Was there a sense that, the British, who are all the judges, were being too harsh on him because he's an Indian? Well, what was because it was a sensational murder and there was a lot of things going on in the media. Did you get a sense of how the Bengal society was reacting to this?
It was a huge sensation, as is always the case. When a rich person goes wrong, we want to read about it. We want to see it, and that was the case. The communal aspect doesn't raise its head in this case. Although there's a moment, which I won't get into too much, where when his back is to the wall and no one is on his side, it's his tenants, these poor Muslim and Santal farmers, who for generations, again, have been squeezed and misused by his family. It is they who rise up to his defense, because he's their ruler, and they're not going to see him pushed around. And it's a remarkable moment when they rise up or attempt to rise up to defend their man.
You have portrayed the British bias against Indians very beautifully, because it's not very overt, it is not oppressive, it is not strident, but at the same time it communicates the message by just passing reference that the British make about Indians. They lie so much you can't believe them, or they are unsanitary, or this Hindu doctor got away with murder, so therefore he must be very clever. A British lady saying this. So these are some of the small nuances which are very important, and you managed to put them into the book.
The story has to be a story. It's got to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and this is about a murder. There's a temptation that I think some writers might fall into, or might give into, to make a story about the evils of colonialism. The evils are plain and clear, and they're best written in the subtle moments and the day-to-day discourse and comments and writing that just, it was the soup that everyone was soaking in. You don't have to hit the reader over the head with it.
But you also mention Brahminism, how that was there, and Bengal was a very, very feudal society at that time, and Brahminism was very strong, and you have references how the policemen did not want to kill the villain, even though they knew he had committed all the murder and everything, but they did not want to kill him, because to murder or to kill a Brahmin was a crime beyond description. You even had some references to how when this villain is finally arrested and put in jail, he had only Brahmin cooks bring him the food. this is felony, a man committed a felony. Those kind of things we cannot even believe had existed because it doesn't exist anymore. But you bring alive these things which were very much part of Indian society.
Yeah, I'm trying to, to paint a picture of the world they lived in as they saw it, as they received it, and as they, at least in Berendra's case, as he tried to change it to his own advantage.
And there is another reference which I really was, we had no idea about this. He talks about in the book, again, a passing reference to the culture, the cultural influences. Bengal, as we know, was the cultural capital of British India. So they were into their own culture, but they were also equally very much into foreign Western culture. So they were reading all the Western books and literature, and they had the British films. And then the Hollywood films came. They were a rage. And believe it or not, it was not the Indians, but the British who were very upset that the Hollywood films were being allowed into Bengal, because these Hollywood films, are wild and wicked, and they showed the women as promiscuous and doing all kinds of naughty things. And the British did not like to have white women being shown as immoral. It was a very interesting thing about how these things developed at that time. We have no clue about it now.
Oh no, there's a genuine moral panic among the British colonial authorities when Hollywood films sort of wash over India, and a primary concern is that English women will be seen in a less than sort of godlike light, because you've got basically all these Hollywood comedies and Hollywood crime pictures showing American people being American, as opposed to being a separate, higher caste from everyone else. And the amount of detail they go into in describing the dangers of these films. There were also Indian traditionalists who were afraid of films, but they were against all films, not just American films. They were against the British films as well. But the fear that these movies, and again, this is at a time when most poor people couldn't afford a film, but that these movies would be an engine for sin and for crime, it's over the top reading. You see testimony before this commission where a simple crime like a bicycle theft will be blamed on an American film, and this will be evidence that this must be curbed immediately.
So one important aspect of the book is germ murders, killing by using germs. And there is some fantastic background that Dan provides in the book about the whole culture of vaccine creation. And then, it's exactly like what we are experiencing now with AI, something fantastic, something technological, a marvel, but also the downsides. So you had the germs that were used for vaccines, tremendous saving of humanity, but all this, at the same time, the germ was being used to kill, poison husbands, wives, all kinds of things, including from the top level. So you've had a few instances, and I will let you speak a little more on that, but you had, for instance, the French accused of poisoning the American president, the German chancellor poisoning with infecting bandages with tetanus. It is, so this whole thing of anti-vaxxers, of conspiracies, these are all there exactly as we experienced during COVID time.
Right. So the story takes place, our true story takes place at a time of really great scientific advances, where you're finding for the first time treatments for diseases that had, caused tremendous numbers of deaths over the centuries. There's also a Wild West atmosphere in which they did not have the controls that we have now over pathogens, because so many people were experimenting with them, trying to create vaccines and treatments for diseases like diphtheria or tetanus or plague or cholera. And so you have a brief flowering of a new kind of homicide, and that's the germ murder, in which typically wealthy families in the US and Europe start bumping each other off with germs that they've been able to purchase. And eventually it lands here in India when our man takes one of the greatest killers of all time, and that's the bubonic plague, and uses that to eliminate his younger brother.
You know, that's all we have time for, but this was just a taste, an appetizer, a trailer for this book. I do recommend strongly that you read it. It's a great reading experience. It's written beautifully. Dan has done a great job, not only unfolding the drama, but also the context that we have all forgotten, which is so interesting and so intriguing. So do get a copy. I promise you, you will enjoy yourself. Curl up and read it, when you can. But thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today. And thank you all for being with us. If only we had time, we could have taken more questions, but we don't. But you'll get all your answers by reading the book.
Thank you all for coming out.